This is Elvis's black box, which was basically like his purse.
Really? What's in here?
When the massive steel doors of Elvis Presley's vault were pulled open after 48 years, a silence seemed to sweep across the room. The air carried with it a strange weight, as though the decades of secrecy had somehow gathered in that confined space. Dust floated in lazy spirals through the pale light, settling on boxes, cases, and objects that had not been touched since the king of rock and roll walked the earth. For so long, the existence of this vault had been spoken of as rumor, a whispered legend passed among die-hard fans and curious historians. Yet here it was, opened at last, revealing its long-hidden contents to astonished eyes. Before we start, smash the like and subscribe buttons for more updates. The vault itself was tucked away beneath Graceland, beneath the well-worn rooms where Elvis once sang late into the night and entertained his closest companions. It had been built to preserve what the world was never meant to see, or perhaps simply what Elvis himself wanted to keep close, away from the noise of fame. The moment the locks gave way and the doors creaked open, a flood of history came rushing back. The scene was not one of sterile organization, but of human intimacy, a glimpse into a man whose life was lived in blinding light, yet guarded by shadows of privacy. Inside lay a labyrinth of trunks, safes, and archival shelves, stacked with items that seemed to speak directly to Elvis's soul. There were recordings, reels of magnetic tape, carefully labeled in his own handwriting. They contained not the polished performances that echoed through stadiums, but raw sessions, private jams, unfinished melodies captured in moments of inspiration. Listening to those tapes, curators discovered a voice more vulnerable, more playful, more restless than the carefully produced albums ever revealed. It was Elvis, stripped of performance, an artist at his core, experimenting and searching for sounds that the world never heard. Alongside the recordings were letters, handwritten notes to friends, family, and lovers. The pen strokes wavered at times, betraying moments of exhaustion or deep emotion. Some letters carried a warmth that only someone living under immense pressure could have felt when reaching out to those who grounded him. Others revealed glimpses of loneliness, confessions that spoke to the isolation hidden beneath the glitter of superstardom. The paper itself carried the faint scent of old ink and time, but the words breathed life into the man who had often been reduced to an icon rather than remembered as a human being. The vault also held objects so personal they seemed almost intrusive to behold. A pair of well-worn blue suede shoes rested inside a velvet-lined box, scuffed and softened by years of wear. There were stage costumes shimmering with rhinestones, not displayed under museum glass, but folded and stored with the creases of memory still intact. A small guitar, its wood scratched and faded, leaned against the corner as though it had been placed there hastily after a late-night session. These artifacts radiated not just history, but intimacy, tokens of a life lived at full throttle, yet always tethered to music and expression. Most shocking of all, however, were journals. Tucked into leather binders, their pages filled with Elvis's thoughts. They painted a portrait far more complex than the public ever knew. He wrote of ambition and fear, of his struggles with fame and health, of his longing for normalcy that always seemed out of reach. These reflections were not written for performance or legacy, but for himself. And perhaps that is why they carried such raw power. They revealed a man grappling with identity, torn between the persona the world demanded and the quieter self he tried to protect. The significance of opening this vault extended beyond curiosity. It redefined Elvis not just as the king of rock and roll, but as an artist, a thinker, and a vulnerable human being. The materials inside challenged the mythic image that had hovered for decades, reminding the world that beneath the rhinestones and spotlight was a man with doubts, dreams, and private joys. This discovery allowed admirers to connect with him in a new way, to hear his unpolished voice and read his unguarded words. It was as though the vault had preserved not just objects, but emotions frozen in time. Cultural historians immediately recognized the implications. This was more than memorabilia. It was a cultural treasure chest. The tapes could expand the understanding of rock's evolution, showing how Elvis experimented with blues, gospel, and country influences in ways not previously documented. The letters and journals offered scholars fresh insight into the toll that fame exacts on creative spirits, a first-hand account of the cost of living under constant public gaze. These findings had the potential to shift the narrative of mid-20th century music history, inserting new depth into the study of a figure whose influence was already monumental. For fans, the emotional weight was even greater. To peer into Elvis's private world felt like being invited into his living room, sharing in the unfiltered essence of who he was. It offered them a bridge across time, allowing them to feel closer to the man who once revolutionized music with a swing of his hips and a tremor in his voice. Many who had adored him from afar now found themselves moved by the tenderness of his letters, or the simplicity of a half-finished song. The vault transformed Elvis from legend into neighbor, from untouchable star into relatable human being. The timing of this unveiling could not have been more poignant. In an age when celebrity culture often thrives on curated images and carefully crafted personas, the contents of the vault reminded people of authenticity. Elvis had built a career before the digital age, when myth often overpowered truth, and yet even then he sought to guard parts of himself from the spotlight. The vault underscored the universal struggle between public expectation and private reality, a theme that resonates as much today as it did half a century ago. The shock, then, was not in scandal or controversy, but in humanity. What startled those who opened the vault was how deeply Elvis's private self differed from his public image. The confident performer who dominated stages worldwide also wrestled with insecurities and an unquenchable search for meaning. He was not simply the king. He was a man trying to balance destiny with desire, spotlight with solitude. The vault offered proof that greatness often carries with it burdens invisible to those watching from afar. As the dust continues to settle from this historic moment, the world stands at the threshold of rediscovering Elvis Presley. His vault, untouched for 48 years, has become a window not just into a career but into a soul. It forces a reevaluation of how history remembers him and perhaps challenges us to rethink how we regard the icons of our own time. For within those walls, hidden away for decades, lay not just artifacts of music history, but the heartbeat of a man whose voice still echoes across generations. The vault door had given way with a low groan, but what lay beyond was not merely a single chamber. The architects of this hidden room had crafted it with multiple compartments, as though Presley, or perhaps those who managed his estate, understood the magnitude of what was being preserved. Each section revealed another layer of Elvis's inner life, and the discoveries inside seemed to grow in significance with every step deeper into the archive. If the initial opening had startled the world, the subsequent revelations shocked even those who had devoted their lives to studying him. One section contained an array of meticulously preserved stage blueprints and set designs, plans for tours that never materialized. Among them were sketches of concert stages more ambitious than anything Elvis had ever brought to life. These were visions of futuristic performances filled with lighting rigs and mechanical innovations that predated their eventual use in large-scale concerts decades later. It became clear that Presley had dreamed not only about songs, but about immersive experiences, imagining performances that pushed beyond what technology of the 1970s could realistically deliver. For scholars of entertainment history, these drawings were a revelation, suggesting that Elvis anticipated the direction live music would take long before pyrotechnics, laser shows, and towering video walls became standard. Tucked alongside those designs were folders stuffed with contracts and proposals, evidence of projects never pursued. A proposed film script, marked with his own annotations in the margins, suggested that Elvis once considered stepping away from the formulaic musicals that defined much of his film career. The handwritten notes indicated frustration with the roles he had been offered, frustration that fans had long suspected but never seen confirmed. Here was proof that Elvis craved more serious dramatic work, dreaming of characters that reflected his complexity rather than reducing him to a smiling figure with a guitar. In that moment, the vault revealed not only what he had done, but also what he had been denied, painting a picture of an artist constrained by the machinery of his own fame. Further along the shelves were journals that did not contain reflections alone, but pages of creative brainstorming. Elvis had scribbled lyrics and fragments of poetry, experimenting with words in ways that were raw and unpolished. Some of the entries hinted at songs he never recorded, weaving themes of longing, redemption, and spiritual searching. Reading those verses felt like listening to a whisper of melodies that could have reshaped his catalog had they been fully realized. The writings hinted at a man restless with creativity, unable to silence the constant stream of ideas even when the pressures of his career sought to confine him. Perhaps most astonishing in the vault was the discovery of early demo discs, lacquer test pressings, and tapes believed to have been lost. Among them were alternate takes of songs that later became hits. These versions carried subtle changes, slightly different guitar riffs, shifts in phrasing, moments where his voice cracked with unfiltered emotion. To hear Elvis experimenting in real time was to step into the recording studio with him, witnessing the choices that eventually shaped musical history. The raw energy of those takes underscored his instinctive artistry, reminding listeners that what often sounded effortless was the product of restless trial and passionate experimentation. The shock deepened when curators uncovered a series of notebooks cataloging Presley's fascination with spirituality and philosophy. Known for dabbling in religious and esoteric texts, Elvis had apparently filled entire volumes with notes on theology, metaphysics, and Eastern traditions. These writings revealed a man searching for answers far beyond the material rewards of fame. He underlined passages about the soul, life after death, and the weight of human purpose. For a cultural icon so often associated with material excess, the cars, the houses, the glittering jumpsuits, this spiritual hunger was startling. It reframed him as a seeker, a man who turned to ancient wisdom to make sense of the whirlwind he lived within. Alongside these profound reflections were lighter artifacts, treasures that brought forward the playful side of Elvis's character. A stack of home movie reels, shot on grainy film, captured intimate moments with friends and family, scenes never intended for the public. They showed Presley laughing during backyard barbecues, tossing a football in the yard, and gently cradling his daughter in candid moments of fatherhood. These films stripped away the stage persona and presented the ordinary joys he clung to. Seeing the king of rock and roll in such relaxed, unguarded moments shocked observers not because they exposed scandal, but because they humanized him in ways his myth rarely allowed. One of the most enigmatic discoveries came in the form of sealed envelopes, each labeled with only a year. Inside were private reflections Elvis had written to his future self. They were not long letters, but brief meditations, capturing his state of mind at particular moments. In one, he expressed gratitude for his fans, but confessed exhaustion from the constant scrutiny. In another, he wrote of his hopes to find balance between performance and family. These notes functioned almost like time capsules, messages from a man aware that he was living through extraordinary times yet desperate to preserve his inner voice amid the noise. Tucked into another compartment was a collection of artifacts from his travels, souvenirs gathered from tours around the world. There were ornate gifts from foreign dignitaries, small trinkets bought at roadside stands, and personal mementos like pressed flowers carefully preserved in wax paper. Each object carried with it a memory of a place and moment. Taken together, they painted Elvis not merely as a global superstar, but as a traveler eager to hold on to fragments of the world he had crossed. The vault also contained financial ledgers, though not in the sterile manner of accountants. Elvis himself had made notes in the margins, commenting on the overwhelming costs of tours, the generosity of gifts he gave, and his occasional frustrations with how money seemed to vanish. These records revealed the human side of his legendary generosity, showing how his impulse to give sometimes clashed with the practical realities of maintaining a vast empire. They also reflected his awareness of being taken advantage of by those who profited from his success, a reality fans had long suspected but never seen documented in his own words. One corner of the vault revealed something entirely unexpected: canvases, sketchbooks, and paints. It appeared that Elvis had turned to visual art in his private hours, experimenting with brushstrokes and sketches. Though not polished works, they carried a striking emotional resonance. The colors were bold, sometimes chaotic, sometimes serene, reflecting the turbulence and calm of his inner world. These artworks shocked observers because they revealed yet another outlet of creativity hidden from public view, suggesting that Presley's artistry could not be contained within music alone. Another section housed correspondence with figures from across the entertainment world. Letters exchanged with musicians, actors, and even political leaders were preserved here. They revealed friendships and collaborations that had never been public knowledge. In some, fellow artists expressed admiration and sought his advice. In others, Elvis revealed his own admiration for peers who inspired him. These exchanges reframed him not only as a performer, but as a participant in a larger cultural dialogue, engaged with the creative community of his time in ways few had imagined. Perhaps the most haunting discovery was a series of photographs taken during his solitary moments. Unlike the staged publicity shots or carefully arranged portraits, these images were raw and candid. Some showed him deep in thought, sitting alone with a guitar. Others caught him staring out windows in reflective silence. Taken by close confidants, these photographs exposed the solitude that fame often forced upon him. They shocked not because they revealed scandal, but because they captured the unguarded weight of a man whose public image rarely left space for silence or solitude. Historians and cultural analysts were quick to note how the vault's revelations transformed understanding of 20th century celebrity. Elvis had often been seen as the prototype of the modern superstar, but the materials suggested he was also acutely aware of the contradictions of fame. He longed for privacy while embracing the stage, sought spiritual depth while being pulled into material excess, dreamed of artistic freedom while being trapped in commercial expectations. These contradictions, laid bare in the vault, painted him not as a flawless icon, but as a deeply human figure navigating extraordinary circumstances. The implications extended even further. For musicians and artists, the vault became a case study in the pressures of creativity under constant observation. Elvis's hidden writings and recordings spoke to the cost of innovation when the world is always watching. For fans, the revelations forged a deeper emotional bond, allowing them to connect not only with the performer they idolized, but with the man who struggled, searched, and dreamed. For cultural historians, the vault redefined the narrative of an era, reshaping how the story of modern music and celebrity would be told. The weight of these discoveries lay not only in their content, but in their preservation. That these artifacts had remained sealed away for nearly half a century was itself astounding. It raised questions about why they were hidden in the first place. Was it Presley's choice to keep them private, or was it the decision of those who managed his estate after his death? Whatever the reason, the unveiling forced the world to reckon with the fragility of memory and the power of what is left behind. Every artifact inside the vault added dimension to Elvis's legacy. The set designs revealed his ambition as a showman ahead of his time. The journals exposed his vulnerabilities and spiritual hunger. The unfinished songs reminded the world of his restless creativity. The private photographs and films captured the human being behind the myth. Together, these discoveries shocked, not by scandalizing, but by revealing truths that had been obscured by decades of legend. They provided a rare opportunity to see history not as a fixed narrative, but as a living story still unfolding, shaped by what emerges from the shadows. The opening of Elvis Presley's vault after 48 years did not simply unearth objects. It unearthed a man. It revealed the dreams he carried, the burdens he bore, and the quiet joys he clung to in private. It offered the world not just artifacts of fame, but testimonies of humanity, preserved in ink, sound, and image. The shock lay in realizing that behind one of the most recognizable faces in history was a soul constantly seeking, constantly creating, constantly striving for meaning. And as scholars, fans, and cultural observers continue to sift through the treasure trove, it becomes clear that the vault was not an end, but a beginning. It is the beginning of a deeper understanding of Elvis Presley, not as a frozen icon of rock and roll, but as a man whose life, like the vault itself, contained multitudes waiting to be opened. The vault's outer chambers had already stunned those who entered, but it was the innermost compartment that carried the greatest sense of anticipation. This was the section sealed with the heaviest bolts, as though Presley or his advisors had wished to ensure its secrecy above all else. When the locks were finally disengaged, the air inside seemed older, as if it had been trapped for half a century. Within these walls lay materials that shifted the understanding of Presley not only as a performer, but as a man engaged with the very currents of his era. What emerged first were personal scrapbooks unlike anything seen before. These were not glossy photo albums produced by record companies or fan clubs, but Elvis's own assemblages, filled with clippings, ticket stubs, and handwritten notes about concerts and encounters. One book focused entirely on his earliest years, with articles from local newspapers charting his rise from a young truck driver in Memphis to the singer who would soon shake the foundations of popular music. In the margins, he had written small reminders of names, places, and emotions, tiny details he did not want forgotten. The scrapbooks gave a sense of how keenly he was aware of his own history in the making, how determined he was to preserve the smaller textures of his journey. More startling still was a collection of private correspondence with military comrades from his service in Germany. Fans had long known that his time in the army shaped him, but these letters revealed the depth of his relationships with those he served alongside. They spoke of camaraderie, frustrations with training, and glimpses of longing for normality. Unlike the celebrity-focused accounts, these letters portrayed him simply as another soldier, joking about rations and weather, confessing fears, and expressing gratitude for moments of quiet. This was the Elvis who blended into a barracks, stripped of stardom, living shoulder to shoulder with men who treated him not as an icon but as a fellow serviceman. Another section of the vault unveiled something rarely associated with Presley: handwritten culinary notes and recipes. Elvis was famous for his love of indulgent Southern comfort foods, but here were pages of dishes he experimented with, some influenced by international cuisine he encountered on tour. There were attempts at German stews, French pastries, and even Mediterranean-inspired meals. Each recipe was annotated with comments: "Too salty, Lisa liked this one, good for late nights." These discoveries shocked because they revealed a domestic side of Presley, a man curious about food not just as indulgence, but as a craft to share with those he loved. It suggested that he sought normality in the simple act of cooking, even amid a life defined by spectacle. In the farthest cabinet rested reels of film far more formal than the home movies previously uncovered. These were documentary-style recordings Presley had commissioned but never released. Some chronicled his tours from behind the scenes, capturing raw footage of rehearsals, band interactions, and travel moments. Others followed him in charitable endeavors, visiting hospitals, supporting community events, and spending time with children's organizations. These films offered an unfiltered lens on the ways he quietly gave back, often away from the headlines. They shocked not because of scandal, but because of the humility they portrayed, a side of Elvis overshadowed by the glittering jumpsuits and screaming fans. Among the vault's most haunting objects were sealed journals marked with simple titles: Dreams. Inside, Presley had recorded his nocturnal visions, written in hurried handwriting, often immediately after waking. These entries revealed how deeply his subconscious wrestled with themes of family, death, and destiny. Recurring images of trains, rivers, and distant stages appeared throughout, suggesting metaphors of movement, transition, and performance. These dream journals startled scholars because they offered an entirely new lens through which to interpret his life and work. They demonstrated that even in sleep, Elvis's mind was restless, weaving narratives that seemed to echo the turbulence of his waking world. Not far from the journals was a cache of correspondence with figures in the civil rights movement and political leaders of the time. Some were replies to letters he had sent. Others were private reflections exchanged with individuals who sought his influence in shaping public opinion. Elvis's place in this dialogue had long been debated, but the vault revealed that he was more engaged than history books suggested. Though not overtly political on stage, in private he wrestled with issues of justice, equality, and the responsibilities of a public figure. These letters showed a man more thoughtful about the cultural changes swirling around him than his neutral public persona indicated. Perhaps one of the most unexpected discoveries was a collection of children's stories written by Presley himself. In simple prose accompanied by whimsical sketches, he had crafted tales clearly intended for his daughter Lisa Marie. They spoke of enchanted forests, animals that played instruments, and kings who learned humility. These stories were tender and imaginative, reflecting a father's love and his desire to pass on lessons through creativity. For fans accustomed to the stage god who electrified arenas, it was shocking to find him here as a storyteller, a parent inventing magical worlds for his child. In another box rested a number of stage costumes that had never been seen before, prototypes for designs that never made it to the spotlight. Some were subtler than the rhinestone-studded suits of his Vegas years, hinting at an aesthetic shift that might have come had he lived longer. The fabrics were finer, the embellishments more restrained, suggesting Presley sought to evolve beyond the flamboyance that had come to define him. For costume historians, these garments offered tantalizing glimpses of a new era of Elvis style that never had the chance to materialize. The vault also yielded evidence of Presley's philanthropic impulses on a scale larger than most had imagined. Documents revealed plans for foundations, charities, and even educational programs that he had begun to outline in the years before his death. Some were formal proposals, others rough notes on legal pads. They pointed toward a vision of using his fame and fortune to create lasting change, a vision that circumstances prevented him from fully realizing. These discoveries shocked observers not because they contradicted the image of Elvis, but because they expanded it, showing a man who thought beyond himself toward legacy and service. Perhaps the most breathtaking find was a private audio diary. On a set of tapes, Elvis had spoken freely into a recorder late at night, reflecting on his life, career, and personal struggles. His voice was intimate, unguarded, filled with pauses and sighs between words. He spoke of the pressure of constant attention, of longing for a simpler life, of his deep gratitude for fans alongside his fear of being consumed by their expectations. These tapes shocked listeners by their candor, They were not performances, but confessions, sonic windows into a mind grappling with contradictions. For historians, they were invaluable. For fans, they were heartbreaking. For culture, they were transformative. The deepest vault drawers contained documents related to music he never had the chance to record. Sheet music, lyric drafts, and notes outlined projects ranging from gospel albums to experimental blends of rock with classical instrumentation. He had written down names of composers he wished to collaborate with, instruments he wanted to experiment with, and even ideas for concept albums. These projects, left unfinished, offered a glimpse of the artistic horizons Presley still dreamed of exploring. The shock lay in realizing how much he had left to give, how many creative frontiers his restless mind continued to imagine. The implications of these findings rippled far beyond Presley's personal story. They spoke to the broader condition of celebrity in the 20th century, the tension between myth and humanity, spectacle and sincerity. Elvis's vault revealed that behind every larger-than-life persona lies an inner world that seldom aligns with public image. His secret scrapbooks, recipes, dream journals, and private recordings forced the world to acknowledge the distance between performance and reality. They suggested that perhaps the true legacy of cultural icons lies not only in what they share, but also in what they guard. For fans, the emotional resonance of these discoveries cannot be overstated. To see Elvis not just as a dazzling performer, but as a soldier, cook, dreamer, philanthropist, and father deepened their connection to him. Each artifact created intimacy, as though the veil of myth had been lifted for just a moment to reveal the human heart within. For scholars, the vault provided new material for decades of study, reshaping the narrative of music history and cultural evolution. For society, it sparked reflection on the costs of fame, the value of privacy, and the enduring need to see legends as flesh and blood. As the vault closed once more after careful cataloging, those present understood that history had shifted. The world would never see Elvis Presley the same way again. The vault's contents were not mere curiosities, but revelations, opening new pathways for understanding the man who changed the course of music and culture. They shocked not with scandal, but with depth, with humanity, with the undeniable truth that even the brightest stars carry hidden constellations within. The opening of Elvis Presley's vault after 48 years was more than the unveiling of a collection. It was the unsealing of a soul. The artifacts inside expanded the story of a man the world thought it already knew. They showed not just the king of rock and roll, but a dreamer, thinker, seeker, father, and human being. And in doing so, they reminded the world that history is never finished, that even decades later, the past still has secrets waiting to be revealed. Among the containers retrieved from the vault was a weathered trunk lined with velvet, holding a collection of gifts Presley had received from fans around the world but never displayed. There were hand-woven quilts stitched with his likeness, letters written in dozens of languages, and delicate carvings sent from distant countries. Each item testified to the global reach of his music, proof that his voice touched lives far beyond the United States. Unlike the carefully curated fan mail showcased at Graceland, these artifacts had been kept privately, perhaps too personal for public exhibition. They reflected the intimacy he felt with the people who adored him, a reminder that fame was built not only on industry machinery but on genuine human connection. Even more intriguing was a bundle of cassette recordings marked with simple labels like Practice or Backstage. These tapes captured casual jam sessions with band members, moments when Elvis experimented with rhythms, joked between verses, and abandoned structure for sheer enjoyment. The energy was raw and unfiltered, revealing the pure joy he found in music when no audience was watching. These spontaneous sounds were the heartbeat of an artist who, despite the pressures of an extraordinary career, never lost his instinctive love for creation. If you liked this video, please give it a like and subscribe to our channel. Also, leave your comments below and tell us, what are your thoughts on Elvis Presley's vault finally being opened? We want to hear from you. Thank you for watching and see you next time.